Good morning and welcome to the third webinar of Aico's Damp and Mould Action and Awareness Week. Today I've got with me Dave Batsford, who's from WHG, and today's webinar is looking at how they have approached the challenge of things like damp and mould and ultimately improving housing conditions for their residents. So welcome Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gareth.
Just as a little sort of brief introduction to yourself really, so what your role is at WHG and sort of your background and what's led you to where you are today would be great.
Yeah. So I'm Dave and I'm the Regional Surveying Manager for WHG. So I joined WHG, I've been with them since transfer of stock. They transferred stock in 2003 and at that time I was a carpenter. And along my career with WHG I moved into the surveying team where I undertook a building surveying degree and damp and mould features heavily in the surveying team. It's one of the the bread and butter sort of tasks that we carry out. And some of the challenges in the team are, I suppose, an ageing stock. Some of our stock, they started building around the 1920s on, just after the Addison Act there, where they did the slum clearances up to that point. And we do have some older sort of Edwardian properties, but they're very few. And high-rise buildings and non-standard construction. And if you think of all the challenges that those different types of, traditional construction and non-standard construction and construction through the 60s in those high-rises, and the challenges they bring, building physics.
So varied sort of career so far, and responsible for sort of disrepair and also as you mentioned damp and mould and leading a team sort of trying to improve those housing conditions for residents. And that's sort of the aim of sort of today's webinar really, is just to understand how WHG have approached not just damp and mould, but obviously very focused on Aico at the moment in time, which is soon to begin. And these webinars are to raise the awareness of things like damp and mould and try and give people the tools to share best practice and gain knowledge. So just sort of looking back at the challenges you face at WHG, what are the biggest challenges for yourselves and other landlords when we look at addressing damp and mould across a large portfolio? So I think you've got about 22,000 properties?
Yeah, just over 22,000 properties. And WHG over the last sort of 2 decades, they've been sort of really proactive on those external wall insulation programs for those solid construction and cavity wall insulation and modern boilers and modern kitchens and bathrooms and running those schemes. And I think some of the challenges we see are, they could be aligned with fuel poverty, if you like, where there's an element of underheating the property, maybe. And each inspection, they're all unique in their own way, and I think environmental monitoring has been, the environmental sensors, they've been quite key in some of the cases where there's been a history of, damp and mould in that property and reporting, where it's like, I ask the question, the curious surveyor within me, I say, well, what is the challenge with this property? What's going wrong with these building physics? We can consider, approved document F and all the challenges, the guidance it gives us there, about cross ventilation and undercuts on doors and where we upgrade with mechanical fans, and we might go to a positive input ventilation system on some of those condensation issues, but it's we can't see or measure carbon dioxide, and we had some good successes with environmental monitoring where in one case we looked at humidity in the bathroom, where that was affecting the bedrooms through transference, and environmental monitoring sort of tells us, well, there's a fan and it's running, but actually is it running? We can, if it wasn't tested properly in the first place, if we didn't go out and use the anemometer to test it properly, the environmental monitors picks that up. If it went faulty along its time or wasn't used, it would pick that up. And that could be affecting the bedroom. And we had one particular success with a bungalow actually, where it was cross ventilation, It was carbon dioxide. There was white screens, black moulds on furniture and possessions. And I attributed it like my nan in her bungalow at the time. And yeah, so we altered the trickle vents on the windows. You know, we cleaned those out. We added an extra one. We looked at the undercut on the door, and we saw the damp and mould risk go down. It was a successful case for that, and there's not been a mould sort of report from that, which was a good success.
So, like, just thinking like significant, you've mentioned like building science. We've got all these potential measures we can implement, and it's that. I suppose, what is the greatest challenge you face? Is it that, have you identified that one use case can be replicated, or is it, like you say, every property survey is generally a unique survey?
Yeah, I think I'm finding at the minute they're all kind of unique and bespoke to their individuals. So we replicate, where there's not a mechanical fan, or we measure it, and with fans, we look at fan rates in litres per second, but actually, if you've got 4 teenagers in the house and they're showering twice a day, then that fan rate in ADF, approved document F, is not set up for that. You need a bespoke setting, don't you? So you need to tune that fan or upgrade it, so it clears that humidity at the shower, the bathroom, to accommodate that family. It has to be a bespoke learning, doesn't it? But I think going back to fuel poverty really, and Walsall generally, where we are in WHG, Walsall Housing Group, where there is quite a high prevalence of fuel poverty there. I mean, we've got mechanisms there with our social prescribing teams and our money advice teams, and where we have permission off the customer we can refer, but fixing, asking somebody to put, heat the property to 18 to 24 degrees within World Health Organization guidelines. It's sometimes it's quite difficult to ask of.
It's a big challenge. Cost of living crisis, which we are in. Energy is getting cheaper really, and combating other things such as rising fuel costs, food costs. So that's a big challenge, isn't it? So just looking at your approach really to your sort of the way you inspect properties. So we've sort of spoke a little bit about how you do survey and inspect, and then how does that lead into your reporting and remediation works? So with reporting, so all of my team complete the Property Care Association training, and in line with the RICS joint statement that came out, our investigations, we look at external observations, internal observations, and we specify our limitations, as well as then room by room, in what we're investigating. But the one thing we did was to try and make that investigation and reports less admin heavy. We wrote our own bespoke app, which leads the surveyor through a series of questions. Is it condensation? What's the cause of that condensation? And then a list of photos and description, so the surveyor can get there. And recently we've looked at that and adopted this now to meet the requirements of Aweb's law, where the requirements of Aweb's law asks, we must specify in that report, are those works in scope? Yes or no? Is there no action? And no action for me is we've gone out and we've given the customer some advice, and try this advice, and let's report it back if it changes or deteriorates, and we specify what advice we give on the report gave, and no action. But also where we have to sort of give that copy of that report, within 3 days, we ask the customer a question: are you happy to be emailed a copy of this? If there's a no answer, are you happy to receive it by post? And we can post it out by the 3rd day, can't we? Our conclusion of that investigation.
Yeah, and then some of the other requirements in there that go on that reporting, that what we designed for WSG was, Arab's Law asks us to we give the customer the contact details, so our email address, our phone number, but it also stipulates the time scales. So where we've said yes, your works are in scope, we're going to remove the hazard, begin to take steps to make those appointments for the rest of the works within 5 days, and aim to complete those works where reasonably practical or within 12 weeks. So all that's captured on the form. So from start to finish, if that damp and mould is in scope, it's identified, it's captured, and then when it's sent, our planning teams get that report, and it will alert them to it's an in-scope, it's urgent works, so they're aware, and then planning team on it. There's another process there that's in place for that. It also automatically, where we think of record keeping for Arab's Law, where we must improve there, we designed the form to automatically update our system with an entry that says Surveyor A came out on the 27th of October at 1 o'clock, and a report has been submitted that may include damp and mould remedial works to satisfy that improvement in record keeping, but also automate it, and to issue and remove that admin heavy process that surveyors have, and remove that if you like. So it's an automated step in there.
Using technology to aid, and so something that you was already working on that you've been able to tailor to the requirements of Arab's Law quite easily, I suppose, as a follow-on, which is good. Getting that evidence base, which is a massive part of what Arab's is looking at, is in those comprehensive records. I suppose come back to the resident now. What role do your customers play in helping you to identify and prevent damp and mould issues?
Yeah, so residents, our customers, they feature a lot in what WHG does, whether that's writing the policy or looking at the damp and mould scripts, the questions that the contact centre ask, but also residents are involved in sort of technology. So again, the environmental sensors, they were influential in that decision. But for my team as well, the residents, we have what we call an involved customer, and they meet regularly in our forums, and this has been going on for some years now. And it started before I started managing the team in this capacity, if you like. But one thing they've been doing with my surveyors is it's like an audit. It's not an audit. It's they're a customer themselves, so they're a WHG resident, and we'll get asked for 4 surveys this month, where they'll contact that customer and explain who they are and what role they have, and they follow up and join the surveyor at the visit. And some of the things that they're asking from a resident's point of view, or a customer's point of view, or a tenant's point of view, because surveyors and where we talk about Arab's Law, we can be quite clinical and about timescales and about the way that we talk about damp and mould in itself, but they can say it from a person's point of view, customer, which is really good. And some of the questions they'll ask, did the surveyor explain what they diagnosed, or how to ventilate the property, or make those little changes that we do. I mean, it could be that we talk about how are you doing your laundry in the property, how are you drying the washing, and it's quite difficult not to appoint blame, because as a surveyor, a tenant or a customer will say, well, you're blaming me for doing my washing or having a shower, and we're not. And it's important to establish that and break those barriers down, and that involved customer could help do that, which is quite good, and have that intelligent conversation, because if you've not got a safe drying area, you're in a low-rise flat, it's not well lit, it's not secure, you don't feel safe going out there. Where are you going to dry? We live in England. Where are you going to dry your washing? It's October now. The weather's quite poor, isn't it? You're going to dry this, so let's have an intelligent conversation. You know, can we shut the door there? Can we use the fan in that room? You know, or even a dehumidifier. You know, if we need to. There's costs that elevate. You know, we get to a tumble dryer, those costs go even higher, don't they? If we tumble dry. But could we put a vent through the wall, for instance, to help the customers, you know, with that tumble dryer, so it doesn't sort of, you know, increase humidity in the flat if it's a vented tumble dryer. But yeah, so those questions that the involved customer ask of the customer, like, you know, did we explain it well? Some of the feedback that we've had has been quite good, and we've had about 4 or 5 rounds of those involved customers, you know, month by month, and the feedback's been really good. And recently WHG held its first customer conference, which was a large conference day with guest speakers, and all those customers were invited, and it was a fantastic day. I was there, and there was Aico was there, demonstrating some of the products, as well as the people that, you know, mow the lawns and things like that, and you can meet all the contractors along the way as well. So it was a really good interactive day for customers, and they're really important with that journey. Yeah,
I think definitely it's understanding your customers and how they use their homes, and factoring that into the repair service is key. You know, if you look at IRAB's law, the context of it is about looking at a person-centred approach. You know, and WHG seem to be taking that in your strides, and the customer conference about just winning support, isn't it, and giving your customers understanding of these are all the services that we provide and have to provide. It's great to see. So just looking, I suppose, all of that and bringing it back to a financial aspect. So, like, how do you manage the financial and like the resource pressures from doing all of this work, all these inspections? How have you met that challenge?
There's a cost. There's a cost in time, and there's a cost in money, isn't there? And other teams within the business and other service areas. And even if we think of developing a bespoke sort of app to do our investigations, which also meets that requirement, this app's been evolving over 12 months. And we've nearly got it where we want it to be, ready for the 27th. And there's a cost there, because Insight and Performance team and IT, you know, developing that, and we keep going back and saying we wanted to do this, we wanted to do that, and but then also like the scripting, where we need to seek a vulnerability for the customer. So scripting team, we need to meet and we need to review the scripting, and we need to scrutinise it. Is the scripting from when a customer makes that first time referral and it comes in through the front door, you know, by phone call or however it comes in, is it fit for purpose? Is it robust? So they scrutinise it. And then with our IWAB's law, we looked at vulnerability and how customers contact us. You know, where IWAB's law allows us to triage photos or videos or video conference. So customers, we set up a specific email address, so my surveyors can triage those photos, videos, day 0, you know, critical where we want that. But then also we looked at resources. So if we were getting, you know, so many thousands of damp and mould tasks a year with a large stock of houses, we looked at how many surveyors we had, how many days of a year that we work. You know, are we at capacity? You know, to meet that. You know, I like a work-life balance for my team. So we put a business case together. We've got to go cap in hand and ask finance and exec to sign off on. I need more surveyors, and I need more resources, and the like. And yeah, so there's a huge cost there in persons, but then also where that report's submitted through planning and admin to boots on the ground, where guys, girls, they're carrying out those fungi washes or those damp and mould repair works. There's an impact there, and WHG employing more multi-trade operatives, WHG employing more admin staff, WHG employing more planners, because we expect, you know, so we can meet demand. So there's a whole review on that that's gone on over the last 12 months, 2 years or more, in preparation for October the 27th, really. And
massive piece of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've probably just scratched
Yeah.
the surface with costs and, you know, time, admin, you know, the like, but yeah.
Feeling a better place, like 2 years down the road. Yeah.
Well, yeah. In some respects, we want October, because we've gone live with scripting, with those vulnerability questions just before Aico's law with damp and mould hazard comes into force. So we can just see how if it does have any impact on reporting, because we're asking those questions about, you know, is there a cardiovascular issue? Is there a respiratory issue? Is it COPD? Is it asthma? Is there you know, a chronic or severe vulnerability? You know, such as a full-time wheelchair user. I wouldn't ask my nan and my granddad to clean mould off a ceiling and climb a step ladder because, you know, because there's an age vulnerability there. You know, we look at age vulnerabilities from very young. You know, we've got a really good ACE program, which is assisting children to excellence. With Connie, one of our directors, and the social prescribing teams that she's got there, and those referrals that she makes from asthma nurses and the like. So we target those ones, but then age vulnerabilities and even pregnancy, because we wouldn't, you know, there's a vulnerability there as well, isn't there? Depending on the stage. So yeah, so we're seeking that sort of information with that damp and mould report. Yeah.
Excellent. So we've talked about Aico's law on a few occasions now. So we've sort of spoke really as we've been going at your preparation at WHG for it, but I suppose what impact do you feel it will have on day-to-day operations, and then sort of like looking to the future on your long-term business planning?
Yeah, and that could include some of the amendments that are coming in 2026. So with Aico's law, so we recognise that with HHSRS, the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, that's been with us now for a couple of decades, and the way I see it, there's a mirror with HHSRS and Aico's law, with the hazards particularly, you know, overcrowding, excluded. And the way that we respond to emergency hazards, so a potential emergency hazard, we do that well within our repairs timescales anyway, don't we? All social landlords in the proverbial we. We respond well, because so a category 1 hazard under HHSRS, our damp and mould policy says we remove the customer from the hazard, or we remove the hazard. So an example would be an electrical hazard in a child's bedroom. If we can't get an electrician there the same day, we need to isolate that room. Anything sort of wider, sort of, you know, a severe damp mould issue, if we can't resolve it and remove that hazard. And we recognise a significant vulnerability with the customer in the property as well. You know, we must remove that customer. And that led to a review of policy as well. And where we say we remove the customer from that hazard, so a temporary housing policy, we had to relook at that, and you know, how are we going to respond to if there is an increase in hazard reporting? You know, where do we put those customers? So do we need temporary properties? How long should customers be in hotels? You know, is it a temporary rehousing? Is it a permanent rehousing? You know, based on the technicality, or you know, there might be specialist works with contractors. You know, how do we look at that? So we reviewed it with our policy, and I sort of say, around 4 weeks, if there's some works to be done where we do need to remove the customer from that property, 4 weeks is unreasonable in a hotel stay. It's no picnic. That routine. If you've got children, they've got to get to school. You've got no self-catering facilities. Some customers, they just want to have self-catering facilities. I had one customer who, she got a young child, and all she wanted to do was just wash the bottles and things like that. And if you're in a hotel, it's awful. So we said 4 weeks is unreasonable, and we're looking at so what we're looking at really, in some cases we've responded quite well recently to some very urgent cases where we found an alternate property. Now, alternative properties out of our void stock is quite limited because we have a long waiting list of customers. So, there's a challenge in all social housing. But those with the greatest need there, where we need to temporarily house them, we looked at putting them in one of our void properties on a temporary basis. And if the works are more significant, on a permanent basis. So we end that tenancy in our original property, and we can deal with those works. And we currently have two. There was 4 last week, but two were relocated back to their properties with completed works. They were short-term works, for about a week or two. One of them is a property fire, unfortunately. So we have 2 at the moment who are in temporary housing. So we looked at that policy, sort of in depth. So we're ready for that. But the challenge in 2026 could be that landlords, we could all be after the same resources, and if it's hotel stays or the like, are all landlords set up, for that, and are those resources there? And it could even be contractors and materials, and even special, people with specialisms such as surveyors. Could there be a significant demand for all of that? It's we don't quite know. There are some similarities to our repairs timescales. So, do we sort of expect a big change? I'm not quite sure, because it mirrors HHSRS, but then also social housing does really well with its repairs timescales. So whether it's an emergency, an urgent, a normal repairs timescale or a programme timescale, and those works where we think Aico's law, if those works are in scope, they must be completed within 12 weeks. That's very similar to what's reasonable. That's our 90-day programme repairs timescale, isn't it? Is the way I usually say it. So 12 weeks is there, but I usually there are some defences in Aico's law, or circumstances where we need to improve the record keeping of those conversations. And I use the example, I'm a school teacher, I'm away Christmas holidays, you can only come out in the February half-term weeks to do the works. It's October now. We would have exceeded, that 12 weeks timescale. But we've recorded that well. We've made a record of it. We had the conversation with the customer. That's the agreement. So there are some caveats in there, and I expect to see some kind of rise. I think the main thing is it's where landlords have these strict timescales to meet them, where we send the customer the report within 3 days. On that conclusion of that inspection. If we triage the works and they're in scope, I've gone backwards, sorry. We investigate it within 10 days. And then the process further then, where we're planning in those works then, and delivering those works. Yeah,
I think like you say, if you look at HHSRS and the time it's been around, everybody has been working to these timescales, and the real change with Aico is about that communication, factoring in the residents' vulnerabilities, and really capturing the information, isn't it? Just to make sure that everybody understands at what point certain properties in a programme of works, and the resident understands, and keeping everybody up to date and informed. But I think impact and risk-wise it's always resource, isn't it? And like I say, the sector fights for the same resource, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That is a significant challenge. So I suppose ultimately, if you just look at the way that you've sort of responded to not just Aico's law, but the damp and mould, you've reviewed policies, procedures, got your residents on board. I suppose what can other landlords, and whether they're social or private landlords, what can they take as a learning piece from the way that we actually have approached this challenge in the sector?
It's a good question, and I think it's the housing ombudsman who sort of, in some of their posts, they say you shouldn't blindly go into October implementation without preparing for it, and there's some similarities to the way that we work normally anyway. But I think with round tables where other associations where heads of departments or those key managers and the like get together, and that's been going on for quite a while, hasn't it? With Aico do lead on some of the round tables in the West Midlands, where we knowledge share and we policy share as well. I mean, a lot of policies are usually public available anyway. But it's quite a proactive step really, just to meet and hear some of the challenges that we all face, and from that there was one example where it was in 2023 when Arab's Law hit the BBC news and we saw a rise in sort of damper mould reporting. And there was a bit of a rise in sort of budget spend on hotel stays as well. And one piece of work that was carried out was we reached out to other landlords and sort of asked the question, well, have you seen any impact? Whether that be a knee-jerk, risk-averse sort of knee-jerk reaction from maybe surveyors or managers or the like. And it came back then that yes, other housing associations had seen the same significant rise in sort of hotel stays, temporary moves and the like. Yeah, so it's the collaboration between organisations is quite good in that respect.
Yeah, sharing a best practice.
Yeah.
What the challenges you face in Warsaw are going to be faced in Wolverhampton, Dudley, Sandwell. It's up and down the country, isn't it? It's the same problem that you're all addressing. It's good sometimes to know that you're not on your own.
Oh yeah.
Bit of reassurance, and if one's had a success in a certain area, it can be replicated quite easy if you're all coming together and sharing that knowledge.
Yeah, and I think it just helps processing that information, doesn't it? Because our law guidance that came out in June 24th, there's been a recent one in October, but our law guidance, it's another piece of legislation to digest and understand and to get to the bottom of. But everybody's on the same journey. I see it with my team, and I see it with if there's 800 people in the organisation, we've all got to understand it in a sort of the same way. And you mentioned human-centric approach, and it is a human-centric approach because there's no calculation, there's no HHSIS calculation to Arab's law. I use the analogy. Would you, your family, your pet, would you sleep in that room tonight? Or would you sleep in that room for a few days whilst the works was carried out? And if the answer is no, well, those works are in scope. Would you, your family, your pet, would you sleep in that room or you waited a few weeks for an appointment for those works to be carried out? Well, that's a routine job. And I think it's important to note whether those works are in scope or out of scope, because we think of Arab's law and it's this level of understanding that everybody's got to sort of calibrate in all our thinking for the new legislation to come. That if the works aren't in scope, then it's a routine job, and it's that triage. And in the guidance it says we can use a risk matrix, risk assessment based risk matrix way of sort of triaging. And we used, so where we consider the vulnerability of the customer, severe vulnerability of the customer, and severe vulnerability of the damper mould, and that'll be triggered if it's in a habitable room. So it's as severe on the walls and the ceiling of a bedroom. That's also triggered. If there's a severe vulnerability, the customer's got chronic, we think of age, young or old, chronic asthma and the like. So Arab's law allows us to do that. But it's just, we did some work with the organisation, the team. We used a Menti system with some photos and a group of people. You say whether you score it between 1 and 4. And it's interesting to see how people score each case. Just seeing a photo where you're triaging those damper mould works. It's interesting to see. you know, in people's calibration of, you know, tolerance and fault. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different approach based on each person's circumstance and sort of history and what they've looked at, isn't it? But
Yeah.
no. Well, thank you for coming today and being part of this conversation and raising awareness in the sector, as like I say, is what we're part of here, and it's the whole premise of damp and mould action awareness. So thank you for being part of that, and it sounds like WHU in a good place, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth, and thank you for Aico as well, and yeah, some of the, you know, the work that they do with the round tables, and even the you know, we nickname it a 21st century solution to a decade-old problem of, you know, condensation and mould. But yeah, no, I appreciate being invited. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.